Welcome to another edition of One on One with Mitch LaFon. Joining me this week from the band Thunder is vocalist Danny Bowes. We talk about pretty much everything under the sun, including their new album, All You Can Eat, last year's return to the studio with Wonder Days, why the band has decided to bring in a record label rather than do it themselves, which they had been doing for many, many years, how come Thunder is popular as heck in the UK, but just can't seem to get it going in North America, and so much more. Why don't we let Danny talk about all this stuff? Here he is, the one, the only, Danny Bowes. We are speaking with Danny Bowes of the band Thunder. Good day, sir.
Good day to you indeed.
Yes, and so we're here to talk about the new release that is coming out, All You Can Eat, which I have to say it's an interesting concept. You basically took the album from last year, Wonder Years, and went into the studio and sort of recorded it live off the floor, correct?
Some of it, yeah. Yeah, some of it, plus some covers and some such a weird and wonderful songs that we'd never played before. It was very much a record company request. The band wasn't overly impressed with the idea of having finished an album, going straight back into the studio to re-record it live. But once we kind of got ourselves set up, and it did seem to take rather a while because obviously we needed to get into our zones so that we could all hear what we were playing and singing without getting down each other's microphones. But once we'd done that and we started going through the discipline of having to start a song and get to the end of the song, and if anybody made a mistake, then start again, there's a kind of an internal pressure that starts to creep in, which is very interesting. It must have been the same way it was for the bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones back in the day when they were playing in 4-track studios. But it's an interesting discipline, and we, in the end, thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, so talk to me a little bit about the process, because you had just put out Wonder Days, and now you're revisiting the songs. As you do that, do you start getting that urge to tinker and say, well, if we just add a bridge here, or if we just add a note here, if I just sing a little high, or do you just go, all right, let's just go in here and punch these out as quickly as possible?
Well, that's certainly, the latter was definitely our approach at the beginning, because like I said, we weren't particularly enamored with the idea of the thing itself. The label said, look, we're going to need B-sides, we're going to need formats, we're going to need this, we're going to need that, we're going to need the other. I'll go back into the studio and just have a blast, play it all live and see what comes. And, when I told the band sort of said, so why do we want to do this then? And they really didn't want to do it. So it was one of these things that kind of crept up on us, because after we'd started doing it and we'd got the sounds and everybody then started enjoying that kind of slightly gnawing pressure that says, I don't want to screw this up because otherwise we'll have to start again. And we've got a lot of songs to work through here. At some stage, I do want to get to the pub and have a pint of beer, So there was this feeling that we didn't really want to have to keep doing it. So, and then that's like a gnawing pressure. And that was the thing. I think that was the thing that really occurred to me more than anything else. You're looking around the room at everybody else. Of course, it's being filmed as well. So, we're conscious of the fact that we're actually performing in the same way as we might perform at a live show, but to no one.
Right. Well,
that was a really strange concept.
Yeah, but the results are great. The for the lack of a better word, the re-recorded versions, there's a certain energy and a certain rawness to them that are just endearing. So it's job well done, I gotta say.
Well, thank you. I think we were very taken with it afterwards. I can remember calling the guy from the label and saying, I made no bones about the fact that the band weren't particularly excited about the idea of doing this and going into the studio for these 2 days. But I'm really quite happy to raise my hand and say it was a very different sort of session, and it was a very interesting session. And I think the most important thing is that after we'd done it, everybody kind of sat around looking at each other saying, I think we've done a good thing here. This is actually quite, it's quite what's the word? Gratifying.
Right.
I think, it's very hard to put it into words because we'd never done it like that before. We played live in the studio, but we'd never gone in specifically to record this many songs back to back. I mean, it was interesting because we didn't get going. I mean, we were in there about 10 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't start playing live until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We spent such a lot of time making sure that we could hear ourselves and, the guitar wasn't getting down the vocal mics and all of that kind of thing. Once we'd actually got the technicals of it right and we started playing about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I think we were done by 8. So we played all of those songs, like 14 songs, pretty much back to back. Every now and again, someone would say, "Oh, I fell over my guitar pedal. Can we just do that one again, please?" And we would start again, and then you would start to feel that sort of, you can feel the eyes, in the room.
Right.
Everybody looking at you go, "Well, don't fall over your pedal next time because we want to get this one done and move on to the next song." So there's a kind of a pressure that builds as you get in further and further into each song. It's almost like, okay, so this is a 5-minute song, and we're 4 minutes in, and nobody screwed up. Let's just keep going. And there's this kind of, it's very exciting. It's like Jeopardy. You feel like you're walking on a tightrope.
Let me ask you about that, because you say you started at 10 and you didn't get going till 3. Was some of that slow dialing in sort of a passive aggressiveness of like, we're not going to make this happen. We're just going to putz around the studio as long as possible? And was there some of that going on? A little bit of frustration?
No, I don't think so. Once they'd accepted the idea that we were going to do it, I mean, usually with this band, it's pretty straightforward. If there's going to be any fireworks, they all happen at the beginning. Once the suggestion has been made, it doesn't usually happen. There's not a kind of a begrudging thing where it continues to fester. We either decide we're going to do something or we don't. But when we've made the decision to do it, then we'll get on.
Okay.
And then it's accepted, and then we'll get on and we'll make the best job we can of it. But the feeling afterwards, I can remember sitting, because we went to the pub afterwards. We finished about 8, and we sat in the pub, and everybody got to the bar, and we ordered our drinks. So I can remember very clearly sitting down with everybody, and everybody was saying kind of, "Oh, blimey, I'm exhausted." Mentally, there's been a lot of concentration going on here. Now, okay, let's put it right. Let's get it in perspective. We could be digging a road. We could be doing a really mundane, difficult job. So it's a luxury and it's a privilege to be in a situation where you could go into a studio as famous as Rack Studios in London, where so many amazing records have been made. And it's a privilege to go in there and play live all day long and then sit in the pub afterwards and say, "I'm so tired." It really is. But it's an amazing feeling to just sit around looking at each other, and everybody's feeling exactly the same way, and you've done something you've never done before, and that when you come back in tomorrow and you pull all the faders up, you're going to listen to it and say, "Wow, we just did that in one take."
Right.
It's interesting.
There was also an acoustic session that was recorded during that time, which hasn't been released. What are we doing with that? Are those just going to be bonus tracks at some point, or will there be an acoustic album?
Some of those tracks I'll be honest, that was much harder to do. It was really strange because we had to reset for that the next day. So we changed all the equipment, moved everything around, sat around in a circle, and we did our thing. But that took a long time to get going, and the actual discipline involved with playing acoustic for us is that much harder to bring about. We like to plug in and rock out, make a lot of noise.
Right.
But with the acoustic thing, there's a lot more finessing to be done. There's a lot more restraint to be exercised. There's a lot more concentration to take place, and we don't find that quite so easy to do as a band. I think what came out of the session was that some songs turned out really brilliantly. Some songs, personally, I felt like we didn't really nail them. They just they turned out okay. I think they'd be interesting to some people, but whether or not we'll end up doing anything with the entire session, I don't know. We didn't put it on the All You Can Eat album purely simply because we didn't have the space. Right. We made a decision that we would only make it 3 discs. And once we'd sat down and considered the restrictions there, the time restrictions, we just used all of the best stuff. That's why not all of the bonus video from both sessions is there, the live show and also the rack session. We only chose the best bits from each. I think there's 6 songs from one and 7 from the other, when there's a lot more material that we left out. It's the same thing with the acoustic. We just thought we can't fit it all in, so let's just use all the stuff that we feel really good about, and the rest of it we'll just put to one side, and who knows, see what happens later on with that.
And of course, All You Can Eat is actually 4 discs out in Japan. They've added I think the Loud Park show as a bonus disc.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that the label had asked you to do this, and you weren't warm to the idea. But for many, many years before that, before you got to Ear Music, you were doing stuff with STC Recordings. Why go outside the band's own label and your own sort of infrastructure and go back to a label and then encounter sort of frustrations like this where you're not the primary source of all the decision making?
Well, I think it was a very deliberate decision. When we formed our own label, it was born purely out of frustration at dealing with record companies. And having run our own record company, when we decided that we were going to make the Wonder Days album after 6 years away from the studio, I said to the band, I think it's time. I think we had the best of the self-release years. I think if we're serious about our international career, yes, of course, we can make more money by releasing our own records because we don't share the money. But I think if we're serious about our international career, we need help. We need help in the countries where our tentacles don't reach. And if we're serious about it, we need to share some of the money and hopefully, get some input in a way that would benefit us, because, we're not so arrogant as to believe that we've got all the answers. And what's interesting is that this has been proven correct with this All You Can Eat album, because we didn't want to do it, and yet we did. And we're glad we did. In hindsight, what we ended up with was so much better than we thought we would end up with. So it's a great case in point.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm glad you did too, because I really like the raw energy of the sort of, again, for the lack of a better word, the re-records. But you mentioned the international presence. Now, I'm sitting here in Montreal, and Thunder just isn't really a thing over here. You look at Spotify, Wonder Days is not on it, and on Spotify Canada. You look at iTunes Canada, Wonder Days is not on it.
There you go.
Yeah, which is bizarre to me. Why do you think it's been so hard for the band to have this huge success in the UK, head over to Japan, and then when it comes to New York, Montreal, Chicago, people just go, yeah, who?
We never really got going.
Right.
I think we never really got going in the territories you mentioned. In America, I mean, we came very, very close. I think had our band started 2 or 3 years before it did, we might have got a foothold in America before the grunge thing kicked in the early 90s. The problem was we didn't. And by the time we were there releasing our first album, we released it on Capitol in America. We released it on Capitol in Canada. It didn't really catch. We subsequently changed labels, and we went to Geffen in America. Although we still stayed on EMI for the rest of the world, we were on Geffen in America. Geffen re-released our first album, Backstreet Symphony. And at the time, MTV was very much, all the rage, and that's how people found out about music, that and the radio, of course. But Dirty Love, the video for Dirty Love, which was one of the lead songs from the first album, that went number one dial MTV for 6 weeks. We sold 250,000 albums in America, but we hadn't even set foot there. So we were thinking, wow, this is it. We're going to get a great tour. We're going to get a great opportunity. We're going to go over there and show these guys what we can do. And bring it on. We were very, very excited about it. But the problem was a man named Kurt Cobain had other ideas, and he basically changed everything. Smells Like Teen Spirit came around in sort of 1990-91, and suddenly, pretty much overnight, the record company changed from being interested in bands like us to being interested in bands like Nirvana.
Right.
And within 2 years, 3 years, we even tried to go to America to make a record. We made our third album in Atlanta, and we made it and we finished it at a record plant in Los Angeles to be close to the label, so that hopefully we could keep them very engaged in it and make the most of the fact that we had an American label, and in the hope that that would work, but it didn't work. We had a tour booked with David Lee Roth and Cinderella in '91, the summer of '91. It was 3 months in huge sheds. It was all. We'd shipped all our equipment. We'd shipped our bicycles. We'd shipped absolutely everything out there to start this tour. We were so excited about it, and with about 5 days to go, our American manager rang up and told us to unpack. He said the tour is not selling. It's not about this kind of music anymore. Pretty much overnight, the radio don't play this kind of music anymore, and you guys, you're going to get like a reputation for being the house band on the Titanic if you come over here, because within a week it will close, and that was it. And we went to Canada instead, actually. We played 2 weeks in Canada, drove coast to coast, and everywhere we played in Canada, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Then we shot down into America, and we played half a dozen club shows while we were waiting to play for a magazine, almost like a private show for a magazine that liked the band. And we played some clubs in America. And during that time, we had the entire audience in the dressing room every night saying, "Who the hell are you guys? We love you. Where can I buy your record?" And at this point, we would sit on the bus every day and say, "Oh, the irony." That was exactly how it went down, and it was terrifying, and we never recovered from it. We never got another opportunity to go play in America or Canada again. And here we are, X years later, having sort of worked our socks off in the UK and worked our socks off in Japan and to a lesser extent in Europe, where we got some opportunities. Where we didn't get the opportunities, we never got a chance to get going.
Yeah, and it's strange because I look at some bands. You got Status Quo, you got the Wild Hearts with Ginger, you've got Terror Vision, and bands like that do fine in the UK. And listen, Status Quo was at Wembley for Live Aid, and then they come here and there's just nothing. And of course, when I spoke to the guys, to Francis in Status Quo, he was telling me, well, we picked the wrong manager. So was there something like, other than just the Nirvana and the grunge thing, were there other business decisions that just, on hindsight, you go, maybe we did pick the wrong manager, maybe we did try to bite off more than we could chew, maybe we should have done more groundwork? Is anything like that?
Well, I think we never really got an opportunity to recover from that whole grunge thing when it happened. You can't, I can remember talking at length with the record company as if, along the lines of, okay, so how do we come to America? How do we get to do this? Our managers were all over it. We had an American manager who understood the market very, very well. And his advice was, there's nothing to be done here. You can't turn this around because the radio is against you.
Right.
Your kind of music is not what people are interested in anymore. And we never recovered from that. I think, I don't think it would have made any difference with the manager, because I think the manager we had in America at the time was very experienced. He's still managing in America now, looking after very successful bands.
Okay, so all right, let me go back then to early 2000s. You left EMI, went over to Castle, and then you decided that you were going to sort of take on the band by yourself and be, self-promoting, self-managing. You had what am I thinking of? Chris doing design concepts, and Ben was doing the Pro Tools stuff. Talk to me about becoming this sort of self-sufficient band and the need in that, and how that helped what you were doing.
Well, I think it gave us almost like a cottage industry approach. It meant, one of the things I said to the band was, the internet is here. Your ability to reach out directly to your fans and interact with them is established. It's tangible. It's real. We can do this. So essentially, we're fortunate that we have money in the bank. So if we want to make a record and we want to release it ourselves, we can do that because we can reach our fans. What it means is if you can think it, then you can do it. But I then put in the caveat that said, but just because you can think it doesn't mean you should do it. You have to make sure that everything justifies the effort. You know, the end result has to be great. So we set about trying to run our label with taking that kind of a philosophy, you know. And it was pretty good because everybody within the band was capable of turning out a job and bringing something to it. Like I said, you know, Chris is not only a very interesting designer, he's also a very interesting engineer. You know, he mixes a lot of the live stuff now since Benny was ill. Ben originally did work the Pro Tools rig for us, and he recorded a lot of the albums, the studio albums, and he mixed a lot of the live albums, especially the Christmas stuff. But Chris kind of took over from that, especially over the last few years when Ben was ill. And so Chris has kind of very much come to the fore. Luke's ability as the kind of the MD of the band has never been in doubt. You know, his ability to write the tunes has never been any doubt. You know, so you know, between us, we had a lot of those bases covered. I think the problem comes after you've been doing it a few years, and you come to realize as a manager or as as the kind of the business, the person responsible for the business, namely myself, you then start to think to yourself, we're suffering internationally because there aren't enough hours in the day, and we don't have enough people on the phone growing our business. And that's something that you can't do as a cottage industry, which is why when it came to this album, or the Wonder Days album, and coming back and getting back into the studio, I said to the band, I think our self-release days certainly should go on the back burner for the time being. I think it's time to collaborate with a record label who can help us in the places that we can't get to.
Right.
And so far, I'm very comfortable with the way it's happened. You know, I mean, we've had a lot of interesting discussions. Obviously, some of it is back to the bad old days where you're kind of butting heads and no, but that won't work, and no, I've already explained to you why we don't want to do that. You know, those sorts of conversations happen again now, which didn't happen before when we run our own label. But you know, you have to take the good bits with the bad bits, and hopefully the good bits are better than the bad bits. And I'm very comfortable working with a label again, and knowing that we have resources, that we have commitment, and we have excitement, genuine excitement when we hand over stuff to them, and then they're all jumping up and down about the ideas that they can bring to it. So, you know, fact is, you and I would not be having this conversation on the phone if I wasn't working with a record label.
And you're absolutely right. Now, they had told us, by the way, that we had 20 minutes, and we've passed that. But if you don't mind, if I could ask you a couple more questions.
Go for it.
2009, 20 years and out, the farewell tour. You know, The Who did a farewell tour in 81. Ozzy did one in 92. Kiss in 2000. You know, the score. Why did you get to that point where you said, we're done, we're calling it a day, and then, of course, here we are 6-7 years later, and, of course, you're back and we're doing music. Why not just in 2009 say, hey, let's just take 3 years off and come back and do Bang and do Wonder Days? Why just sort of throw in the towel and say, we're done?
Well, I think with the benefit of hindsight, you can always look back and say, maybe we shouldn't have done that. But I didn't have hindsight in 2008 when I was on the edge of having a nervous breakdown. And at that point, trying to be the head cook and bottle washer, the manager, doing all the deals, booking all the shows, and trying to do all of the things that I was trying to do on a daily basis. I was working 16, 17 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I did that for 7 years. And that it takes its toll on you. So you start to become slightly emotionally ragged. And I got to the point where I felt like if I didn't stop doing it, I would pay a very heavy price for it. And so I think it was the end of 2008. I sat down over the Christmas festivities when things were quiet and the music business was on a break. And I thought about it. I thought about it very hard, and I just came to the conclusion that I didn't want to do it anymore. So I relayed this to the band in the January of 2009. The band were slightly shocked because they had no idea how hard it was to run the record label day in, day out, and take care of all the things that I was doing. And so they tried to persuade me not to quit, but I was adamant I needed to. I felt like I needed to. I had an opportunity at this point to go off and fly a desk for a very successful independent booking agent. And I decided I wanted to do that, because anything felt better at that point. I was so emotionally wrecked and mentally exhausted that I don't think I was necessarily in my right mind. And I tried to reason it out as best I could, as level-headed. I'm a very logical person. And the conclusion I came to was that I just needed to stop being in a band. And I needed to stop releasing records and doing all that stuff. And it was only really 3 years later,
Right.
having done the other thing, I came to the conclusion that maybe I felt differently. And that was the beginning of the way back for Thunder. You know, by then the others were all busy doing other things in other bands. You know, we all stayed friends, and they understood my reasoning. They didn't like it, but they understood it in the end. And that was it. So you can't look back to 2008 and 2009 and say, well, we should have just said, let's take a break, because that's not how I felt. You know, in 2008, I felt I don't want to do this anymore. And so that was the decision. We decided that we would tell people we were splitting up because that's what we were doing. It was not our intention to come back. It really wasn't. It wasn't our intention to come back in 2000 either. Both
Right.
times, unfortunately, my fault. What can I tell you? I'm an emotional guy.
Right. And of course, in that time, you went off and worked with Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics, I should say.
Yeah.
Boy, I'm just trying to see where I want to go next. I got millions of questions, and I see the time is ticking. Just quickly, Terraplane and Luke. You've been with him for 35 years or so.
No, more than that. It was 40 years since we formed our first band last December.
Oh, that's right. So,
Yeah.
so what does he mean to you in terms of just everything in your personal life, on the band side, on the business side? What is Luke to you?
What is Luke to me? Luke is a constant.
Right.
He's always been there. And I am the same thing to him.
Right.
Regardless of whether or not we've been in the band together, during times when we've had hiatuses, we still talk on the phone all the time. We always have, because we're in business together. We're inextricably linked, and always have been, and always will be. There is no way around that. We're very, very different people. We don't spend a lot of time in each other's company when we're not working. But we talk on the phone all the time about our business. We agree pretty much about everything. In the 40 years that we've worked together, Luke and I have had 2 disagreements, which is quite astounding when you consider how many opportunities there will have been for disagreement.
And the pressures of the business. I mean,
There you go.
the business eats up their young and spits them out. I mean, there's no denying that. So
Correct. But I'm quite happy to engage in an argument with anybody. I can have an argument in a paper bag. Whereas Luke will run 100 miles rather than have an argument with anyone. Doesn't mean he won't get his way, because he's very, very, very canny and very good at turning an argument. He should have been a diplomat. He's very good at getting his way, regardless of the odds and regardless of the arguments. I'm a very different sort of character, and I think we complement each other very well. He's incredibly strong-willed, and he's my friend.
yeah, which is good to hear, because sometimes when you listen to bands talk, they go, well, he's not my friend, but he's my business partner, and we make good money together, but we don't talk to each other, and so it's nice to hear a different take on that.
I kid you not, Mitch. I absolutely mean this 100%. We as a group of individuals, we spent all our time laughing. We always have. With our first bass player back in 1989, it became very clear quite quickly that he was not really suited to being in a band with us. And it took 2 years before we were in a position where that came to a head. And so we parted company with him. The guy we replaced him with, the Swede, Michael, he was in the band for 3 years, and it was his decision to leave the band because he had all kinds of personal issues with his family. But it wasn't to do with us. We had no desire for him to leave the band, but he had to. So we respected his decision, and he went. He's been replaced by Chris, and Chris has been there for 20 years. And we just laugh. That's what we do. We just laugh. We all get on very well as a bunch of individuals. There's none of this stick together for the money stuff. That's not the way we work. We've never... For us, it's much more about the craft. It's about the work. It's about having a really good time doing it, and far less about the money. We like to make money, but that's not a reason we get out of bed.
Right. And I'll finish with this because we've gone over here. Bowes and Marley, the last album was in 2004. Do you think you might do something together again just for the fun of it, or really you're just concentrating on Thunder and the Planet Rock gig and all that other stuff?
Thunder takes up too much of our time to be able to do other things as well. Okay. That's the problem. It's always been the problem. When we did Bowes and Morley at a point when Thunder wasn't active, and we did it because we could. And I think the moment Thunder got back together, then Bowes and Morley kind of went on the back burner, and it will be that way until such times as we're in a position to when Thunder doesn't take precedence again. It's what it is. But there's no reason why we wouldn't do it. I mean, we had great fun making the records and great fun playing the shows. It's great to stretch yourself musically and go into those other areas of influence. Because we've been influenced by all kinds of music, not just 70s based classic rock music. We listen to all kinds of stuff, soul music and, old fashioned R&B and, all of that kind of stuff, had a huge influence on us, and pop music, had a huge influence on us kids.
Yes. And then let's end with this. The Wonder Days, I should say, was a great return to form. The band, though, did disband twice. You did go your separate ways. Are we sort of done with that now? Are we back into it'll just be what it'll be, and if there's another record in 2017, so be it, and if there's not, so be it too. What is the future?
It's very, very much our intention to make another record. Okay. We feel very, very comfortable having made the Wonder Days album and released the Wonder Days album. We're very happy with the reception. We're very happy with the way that the new material fits into our live set. These are like comfortable shoes instantly, and that's very unusual. And usually sometimes these new songs take a little while to bed in, but that wasn't the case with these songs that we played from the Wonder Days album. They just literally felt very good straight away. So we are very, very happy with where we're at. Obviously, we've got help now. A lot of the mistakes that we made, and I personally made as a manager and trying to run the record label, where that thing became bigger and bigger and bigger, that has gone away now because we've got help. So we've taken steps to make sure that we don't repeat mistakes from the past. And I think that provided we stay happy and healthy with the situation we're in, we're already talking about making another record, and we'd love to release another one in 2017 and then go through that whole process again. The great thing we have this time that we didn't have before is we have momentum, and we have an international presence which is growing, hopefully, stronger from month to month. The ripples of love for the Wonder Days album are still coming home to us now. And I think that just sets us up really well for the next record, which hopefully we'll make some more advances with.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that. And I would certainly love to see a Thunder show either in Montreal or Ottawa or Toronto or something like that. And
we would dearly love to get there and play some shows. The last time we played in Canada was a long time ago, and the shows were fantastic, and we would dearly love to come back and do it all over again.
Well, I'll be happy to help in any way possible, because I do know people. So let's get Thunder over here and get Backstreet Symphony and Dirty Love and all the great stuff with the Wonder Days stuff too. Great pleasure talking to you.
You're a gentleman, sir. You're a gentleman.
Absolutely. So have you. It's been a great pleasure. I'm glad. It took a little while to get this interview done, but I'm glad it got done. It turned out well, and I think folks will enjoy listening to it. So
well, I hope so.
Yeah. And Danny, great pleasure, and best of luck with All You Can Eat. And I tell you, I bought the Japanese version of it. I bought the Japanese version of Wonder Days. I couldn't get enough of the great music you've made in the last couple of years, and of course all the stuff in the past. And I'm looking forward to 2017 to get more.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Take care, Mitch. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. And there you have it, folks, my interview with singer Danny Bowes of the band Thunder. Their new album is All You Can Eat. I certainly recommend picking that up. And if you haven't done so, go back to last year's release, Wonder Days. It is big hooks, big riffs, big choruses, everything we like about hard rock. So pick that up as well. Check out the band at thunderonline.com and check me out at Mitch LaFawn on Twitter and one-on-one Mitch LaFawn on Facebook. Thank you for listening. Certainly hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll do this again soon. Bye for now.